general feedback, but she didn't say that. So I, because I know that this has already been edited, I kind of went a lot deeper than that, like a lot more feedback. What about you gals?
Yeah, I did.
Bringing it for content.
Yeah, I want to start off with some meat though. It is
Me too.
not easy what she is trying to do here, and I often. Did you ever find yourself just like stuck in your book and then treatment, and I read a whole article on it once, and it was really fascinating. Hello, and welcome to the Postcast. I just did a real big yawn and explained to the ladies that I felt I really needed an intake of oxygen, so that's what you all are stumbling into the middle of. Also, I have already done the randomizer to select the order that we will be sharing our Postcast pieces in this week. And for those of you who, well, you probably all listen to the podcast, but just in case, we are going to be recording these Postcasts now on Fridays instead of Thursdays. So it's going to bump up the schedule for when they'll be available for you guys on the Patreon. So please bear with us as we make this transition, and also to the new format. As you can see, things are a little different. Google Hangouts is going away, and that was our former means of communicating with y'all. So instead, now we are using a different Be Live, it's called. And so bear with us as we smooth over the tech issues. So without further ado, this week we have Tina, Jen, Jamie, Rhonda. So that is the order that we will be discussing these pieces. You guys ready to jump into it, or do you guys need a second?
I am ready.
I got to pull my mic back down because I was eating.
I'm a little scared.
Tina, why don't you talk to us a bit about what you wanted to learn or know about the piece?
Okay, well, I feel like I should explain my method of editing real quick, because I'm using the stoplight method. So what I'm doing is I'm going through and reading the scenes, and I'm marking the sections with red. Those are like story structure issues that need to be changed. Yellow is stuff like passive voice, head hopping, grammar issues, that kind of stuff. And then green is just like, you know, spelling and commas and that kind of like little stuff that the pro writing aid will pick up eventually. And so what I'm working, so I went through and I marked the red problems in my story, and that's what I'm working on first. So I'm going to get all the red stuff done before I go back and work on the yellow stuff, and then the green will be last. So that's my technique that I'm using. So this is a scene that when I first wrote it, I had this really, really long, I mean, somebody said that the revised version is 8 pages. I'm pretty sure that the original was like almost 10,000 words.
Wow.
Of this conversation. I actually had to break it up into 3 parts because it was so long. And I just thought, nobody's going to want to sit here and read this 3-part conversation. A lot of it, some of it was info dumpy. Some of it was just didn't need to be there at all. So that was one of my red things that I did. And so I went down there and I really cut it down. And so I just need to know, does it make sense? Like, did you have any questions about what was actually going on? Did I cut too much information out? That kind of stuff. Does that make sense?
Yep. Okay. So you don't get to talk while we discuss your piece, but you can make some little notes there and perhaps come back and give us some feedback when we have
I thought you were going to
finished.
tell me I could make faces at you.
Sure you can.
I thought that's what you were
Like
going
we
to
can
say.
stop you.
You know, we all need to have admin capabilities like Jen does so that we can put things in that banner below us. Like, what do you mean I used passive voice or like
Or-
whatever? Wouldn't that be fun if we could change
Or-
the banner?
Yeah, or I can do that. Bye-bye,
How fun.
Tina.
Oh, man. Oh, she's pouting.
No,
Oh.
here it comes. Here it comes.
You're back, Tina.
I'm fine.
Yeah, that's dangerous to do because what if you think that you're not on camera and then randomly you're put back?
Pick your nose.
What kind of shenanigans can you get up to? Okay, so into the isolation chamber with you, Miss Katane, and we will have a discussion about your piece.
Okay, so I went way deeper than what she made it kind of sound like she was looking for just kind of some general feedback, but she didn't say that. So I, because I know that this has already been edited, I kind of went a lot deeper than that, like a lot more feedback. What about you gals?
Yeah, I
was
did.
reading it for content.
Yeah, I want to start off with some meat though. It is
Me too.
not easy what she is trying to do here, and I often. Did you ever find yourself just like stuck in your book and then you think, well, how can I communicate blah, 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 blah. And then you see that an author handles the exact same situation by just straight up saying this happened, then this happened. She does a really good job of communicating theme and place and relationships here. And it's not easy to do, right? So I just want to say big kudos to her for, these kinds of scenes are hard sometimes to get through. So good job.
I'd like to say that we've seen different versions of this, and we've seen lots of parts of this book, and whatever she's doing, the editing she's doing, it is spot on. She is at the point now where editors can come in. I know this because I know where my books were before I gave them to editors, and then once the editor saw it, and then I would get that feedback. So I want to like warn her that like I love what she's done here, so love it, but I do have a lot of feedback to give her, and I don't want her to be disheartened. I want her to know that just means that should be encouraging to her, that she's at the point where it could be like literally the editor could be like going through it now, where before it was still there was so much work she needed to do to kind of bring things together. I feel like this was more cohesive and so well written, more so than lots of other things that we've seen from this book. So I'm very excited now.
I would agree with that.
So how do you guys, or did you want to say some meat first, Rhonda, before we got into this? Because there's a lot here, 8 pages.
Meat? No.
Oh.
I do not want to start.
I know meat. I meant bread. Sorry.
Bread. We said bread. We said meat, but we meant bread. I hope all of that was
Right.
taken
Okay.
as good, what we just said.
Yes. Sorry. Golly.
I was like, wow, what's their bread stuff going to be? What is their bread going to be?
No wonder you
Okay.
sunk back in the chair and you was like, I'm just going to be quiet.
Yes. No. Okay. So I was really fascinated with this piece. I guess the meat that I'll give right now is that when I first saw that it was like, I don't know, 40 pages or whatever she gave us yesterday, I was like, oh, could she have done this earlier? But when I was done reading, I was like, wait, I'm done already? It read so quickly for me that I just, I liked what I read. So anyway, I'll go on with me later and then my final bread. But my bread is that she did a great job.
So I if I had just sat and read it, I think I would have read it quickly too, because I feel like it was pretty well written. But what I did was when I approached the piece, I looked at the word count, and it was over 3,500 or somewhere hovering around 3,500. Now that can be a chapter. Generally, I would say 2,500 or less. That's my opinion, and I know every genre is probably different. But so I looked at it from that perspective. If I were an editor and got this, how would I tighten it up? And that's what I looked at. And I think that as well as she did, there's quite a few areas that I found that I think that she could tighten up. So
I would agree with that. And maybe, Jen, it would be neat if you put Christina Katane in our banner or something, just so we could say whose turn it is or whatever. Like that could be fun, right?
Yeah,
and then that way it can remind you all what our names are. Because if you're anything like me, I would forget. oh, what's that girl on the Christian Neighbor Writers podcast who talks all the time? And they would say, which one?
Yeah.
And yeah, so, all right. So we're discussing Christina Cataine's excerpt of her book, Lost in Land of Midnight Sun. So, yes, Jennifer, I would agree with you. Like the whole, you must be delirious. There was way too many of those. I did suggest that she chop those out of there. And I am like you, Jennifer. I agree that this piece is ready for sort of like content editing. And so I gave it the same treatment that I gave your Esther story. I put it up in the Google and I made suggestions as to where I thought she should flesh out and where I thought that she should chop. And I don't want her to see all of the suggestions and become discouraged.
Right.
Typically, when I make the suggestions, it's because I'm reading and I feel like this is great, but it would be better if you put in something like, and then I'll type a whole paragraph of like, oh, grandfather, you know, blah, 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 blah. And they're just suggestions. But when she sees those, I just want her to feel like I obviously wanted a little more, because what I felt that this lacked was a little bit of the emotional connection and a little bit of the internal of how I'm thinking and feeling when I'm getting these responses. So when the grandfather says that he didn't want to have to tell her, but now it appears that he has to tell her, I want there to be like a loving look between grandfather and granddaughter, for example, right? I mean, I want there to be, I want you to feel like, feel something for Angelica in the scene, even though the story is told in a good way. You know, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. I was missing a little bit of the emotional connection. So I went in and I plugged in a couple of suggestions of the kinds of words she could use, but she should just look at those as flags of areas to elaborate on emotion.
Right. Okay. One of the things that I remember I told you about word count, so I went through and I found things that I thought were repetitive or maybe were better left unsaid. And I probably cut at least 1,000 words of this from her. And again, like Jamie said, I don't want her to be discouraged, and she doesn't have to take this advice. But like the first paragraph on the second page, I cut most of that out. So it starts at the bottom of the page. His eyes closed again, and the he should be gone. That's a typo. His head turned in such a way that it highlighted the 2 long scars that ran down the right side of his face from brow to chin, comma, evidence of an encounter with a bear from long ago. Skip all the way down to Angelica loved her grandpa's scarred face. They gave him a certain character, tough but gentle, blah, blah, blah. The whole part there about the kids and him having candy, I think what she's trying to do is to try to show that the grandfather, like his personality, but I feel like it's just too telly. And unless the children are going to come into play into the story, unless him having candy in his pocket is something we need to know for later, then I say cut it. It's not necessary. The fact that she likes his scarred face, you know, that she loves the scarred face and what she says about, you know, the stories he tells, that is enough for that chapter or that paragraph. The next.
Yeah, I would not miss that. I would not miss that there.
Right.
So I'm in agreement with you that could totally be cut and it wouldn't impact. What do you think, Rhonda? You think the piece could be just as strong without that bit about the kids with the candy?
Yeah, it could. And one piece of meat was I was wondering what kind of treat would he have in his pockets that, you know, he's not going to have, like an old man in our neighborhood used to have peppermints in his pocket all the time. And so that kind of stumbled me. So, yeah, I would like to see that part gone.
And then after that, I feel like that sometimes we get lost, like pulled out of the story with some. I agree. There are parts that I put that she needs to like maybe stop there a little bit longer and let us know like what he looks like or what's going on. But there are other parts that just kind of like drag on. Like the next paragraph, she looked in the direction he'd pointed. Next to his old spruce rocking chair was his memory box. And then I would cut, like if she wants to say or his memory box, comma, under a moose hide and tobacco pouch. Don't give us all 3 things and then go right to the next paragraph. Grandpa's hot fingers wrapped around Angelica's forearm. He tried to sit up, struggling and agitated. Get the journal, Hannah. You must take it with you. That's how I edited it, because he says something about the journal and his memory box. And then she looks over at the memory box and then he grabs her hand. You have to get the journal. We don't need to have that inside her head. What do you mean he didn't take it with her? Like he's already told her that she needs to take it with her. You don't need to repeat that.
I agree. There was a little bit too much of like what are you saying? What do you mean? And so, yeah, that's a really good suggestion to edit out that bit there.
Let
It would
the
only make
reader-
it stronger, I feel.
Yes. Let the reader think those things. You don't have to always tell us everything that we should be thinking or what the character is thinking. Let the reader interpret that, and it'll make the story move around a lot faster. So the page, and then another major, there's other cuts, and I'm going to share this with Tina later, but another major cut that I made was on the top of the 4th page. It's the paragraph starts on the bottom of the 3rd page. Angelica tried to imagine what it was like to pack up and leave your village and travel through the wilderness to an unknown destination. Cut all the rest of that out and replace it with what would it be like? What would it be like to leave her quiet village? Or then cut the rest of that out and say, what would it be like to never answer the voice that called her to when she stood on the ridge that faced the southern boundary? She doesn't. I think that in that paragraph, she makes the character too introspective. The character hasn't is thinking too much about, like, well, what if I do this and what if I do that? Where she has not had time to process that she's doing this journey. Like, if someone is just told you have to take this journey, grab the journal and go, you're not going to be thinking a whole lot about, but what if and what if? She's going to think about the 2 major things. And I think that she shows us the rest of this throughout her characterization and what she's written. We know that the mom is gone and she wants to wait for her mom. We know that, she's scared or whatever.
Well, that's really interesting because so you wanted a cut there, and I suggested that she park there because you're saying, well, we know this and we know that. And the problem is, as always, we're not reading this in a consecutive.
Yeah.
I don't know what I already know about Angelica. So I actually had her park there and say, as always happened when she turned her thoughts toward those who've been irreparably lost in the forest, Angelica's mind turned to her own mother. No, she thought, as she always did, my mother will return, must return. But what if her mother never returned? And then so blah, blah, blah. So whatever. But the point is, like, I guess overall, what is the point of this piece? And so where I would cut is I don't understand Miriam and her role. I didn't understand that she was like a nurse to him. I don't know if that's described in the chapter before. If it's not, it was totally not. I did not have a clue who she was.
Well, she called her the healer when at the very beginning. She does identify her as the healer.
Yep.
So
just so Tina knows, that was clear to me. I understood why Miriam was there.
And she has to be there because she's the one that's going to spill the beans. So
I understand that she needs to be there, but it was, I don't know what it was. It felt a little, maybe the beginning just felt a little too like it didn't get to the point quick enough. So in other words, I'm kind of with Jennifer that cuts need to happen and that the chapter felt too long and kind of too slow. I guess we may just disagree about where to camp and where to focus. And you can look at the suggestions I made and the ones that Jennifer made, and then it's pretty much author's choice, because like I thought that this section was supposed to really dwell on the battle within Angelica. Do I stay home? Which also, I never knew that she had dreamed of adventure, but had withheld herself from dreaming of adventure. So it's this conflict between, do I stay home and wait for mom, or do I go off in my life and have grand adventures that are big and great? And so the things that I said that you should dwell and focus on are to build that internal, I'm having this struggle as Angelica, right? And so it may be that Jennifer's cuts and my suggestions actually line up to make some sort of like, Frankenstein chapter that works just great. But it'll be interesting for you to take a look at the suggestions and see what you like. But I do agree, it does need some tightening up.
Yeah. So what you're saying, I can see that too. So like, really the purpose. So you're looking at maybe the purpose differently than I am. You're looking at the purpose that this should be like her internal struggle. And when I read it, I was looking at the purpose is to get her on the journey, and that there should be an urgency felt when we read it. So that's why I think that maybe my cuts are looking different than what yours were. So again, then maybe that Tina needs to decide which is the main purpose of this chapter. And that would maybe help us when giving her suggestions too. So the only other thing that I really wanted to make sure I mentioned, and maybe it won't matter if it's not an urgent chapter and she doesn't be running, is that her grandfather tells her, you have to go now. They're going to tell, they'll catch you. She's going to go tell on you. And then the first thing she does is she goes back to her campsite and puts a kettle on to boil. Like, that confused me altogether, because that is not the first thing that I would do. Like, it felt like all of a sudden just the mood changed out of nowhere. And I think that what she's trying to do is that she's trying to get Petra to show up. And I get that. I think if I were a reader, I would more expect her to be like rushing to the campsite to grab her stuff, and Petra showing up and saying the same stuff. She's told on you. They're coming. You forget this stuff. Leave half your camp. Just go. Something like that. That I think would feel more authentic. Because I know she needs to have Petra in there. I'm like excited about.
But then, I guess, okay. And so I guess that's kind of why I thought, like, she leaves Grandpa's cabin and she's like, oh, I'm not supposed to be. See, because I was very confused about like the logistics, because she's like, what if my mom comes and I'm not here? But I thought Grandpa was somewhere different than where Mom would be returning to. So, like, I didn't understand where I was logistically in the story. Mm-hmm. And then the fact that she has a camp somewhere nearby was even further confusing to me. Yeah, so I didn't quite understand. So when she said, you need to get out of here, I thought it was sufficient enough that she was away from Grandpa, because she's like, well, I'm not supposed to be here with Grandpa. So then when she got back to her little camp, she's now safe and not going to be in trouble for being with Grandpa. But Petra's information is, you are not safe because they know you've been to see Grandpa, right? So I think that if we have better clarity as to where is this little camp, if the camp is somewhere she's supposed to be, but that the violation is that she left her camp, it might make you feel a little better about her going back to prepare tea, because she's still struggling with whether or not she needs to take this journey. So she's like, Grandpa's telling me to run and go to the south, but I want to stay here, because I think she's like trying to be purified from when she was into the sick people's whatever. And I think that's where her camp is like her purification time that she's doing. Mm-hmm. So do you see what I'm saying, Jen? Like, I think if we knew the purpose of the camp, it might feel a little bit different. So she got away from Grandpa. So his urgency was like, get out of here before they catch you here. But the camp is where she was supposed to be, until Petra arrives and says, that's not good enough. They know you've been to see Grandpa. You really need to leave. But if so, that was completely not clear, and I was really confused, and I had to really give a lot of thought to it.
Right. I thought that Grandpa was saying you have to leave camp, run now.
Me too, yeah.
So what you're saying is you have to leave my house, go back to your camp, was how
she would interpret it. He was saying to her, go now, find the other half of the Bible. But she's like, crazy old man, I just need to get out of here and go back to my camp, because if I'm busted here at Grandpa's house, I'm going to get a hiding or whatever.
Right.
So she had not yet decided to take the journey that Grandpa was wanting her to go on. And then but anyway, I'm with you that it is completely not clear, but I'm just saying that I think that is the intent of the author. What did you think, Rhonda? Were you clear?
Okay. All right. What I have to say, I read it as a reader, not as an editor. Okay. And by the end of the first page, I was engrossed in it. So maybe some things could be cut out. Maybe they don't need to be. So you guys both have very valid points about all of that. But to read it and not get taken out of it, I didn't need to have anything cut out of it. I like the way she used the device of you've got this teenage girl who has teenage tendencies no matter what era she's in.
Yeah, for sure.
And not paying attention to what this old man is saying, even though she reveres him and all that. But the way that the old man kept waking up and falling asleep and giving her a little bit of information, a little bit more, I think she did a really good job doing that throughout this. And maybe one of those could be taken out. I don't know, but I didn't need it to be. And the fact that she went back to the campsite, I was like, oh, you teenager, why don't you go find your mother? Didn't you listen to what he was saying? And the healer, I don't know how much she's going to be in the story, but she's definitely an irritant to me. Oh, my word. So let's see. What else did I want to say? Okay. I will tell you, I did get stopped for a minute, about 4 or 5 paragraphs into the first page, where she says, it's just hair, run your hand over the stubble, the heat flooding her cheeks. I thought, wait a minute. I forgot that she had her head shaven and she's rubbing her cheeks. And I thought, does she have like other issues that we don't know about? Because, you know, sometimes I've got my own to deal with. And I thought, is there
No,
something else?
She doesn't rub her
I-
cheek.
Yeah,
She
the heat
rubbed-
flooding for her cheek. Right.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
understand that now. But maybe she could just reword that a little bit, because my first thought was, this girl has a beard. And, you know, do I not know something that, but so that is probably
I didn't get
literally okay. So let's see. I really liked the way that it ended, because it just, to me, the tension just kept amping up a little bit more every time the old man woke up, or every time the old man fell back asleep. And then when she got tattled on, and then she went just to her campsite, it was like, oh, what's going to happen in the next chapter? Is she going to be caught? They've got to be right around the corner. How is she going to not be caught if she's going to act stupid? So, I think that's pretty much everything I have to say. Because like I said, I didn't read it as an editor. I read it as a reader. So I liked it.
So my bread, a couple things. I love the ending. I love that she's going the opposite direction of what we all know she should go. And I
Yes.
love that even the dog knows that she should be going south, and she ignores the dog too. Like, I'm getting goosebumps right now. I wrote that on there. I wrote love exclamation point on that. I just love that, because that like is just, that's well written, and that makes me want to turn the page. I'm like, what is she doing? No. And
Yeah, and I love the dog wooing at her.
Yeah,
and,
yeah,
yeah.
And them talking, and she's like, "Et tu, Brute?" You know, and she's like, "I can't believe everybody is against me and my desire to, you know, play it safe or whatever." Mhm.
Yeah.
and
Because we all know Chugak knows what's going on. We know that.
right. And I would like to offer some encouragement to let the author know, because I've been through this twice, that what marks you're going to get from Jamie and what you're going to see from me when I give this to you are exactly what I get. When I turn in my writing, you see either like a few of the things that I submit here, and then you see the final product. You don't see the deep editor marks that I get and all the red marks and all of that. It's just like this. So please don't be discouraged. This is actually good news. This is like, you are almost to the finish line, and I am so excited for you. And this, when I read this, jazzed me so much for you, Tina, that I cannot wait for you to, I know it's disheartening, and I know it's exhausting, and you feel like you just want to pull your hair out, because this is just one part and you have all the rest of it for, you know, an editor to look at. But I'm telling you, it's coming, and I'm so excited for you.
I would agree. And I would say, you know, you look at these suggestions, you accept or don't accept, and you make the changes or you don't, and then you're done. So I
Right.
would say that, you know, you address the issues and the concerns that Jen and I bring up, and you make fixes or don't, and then you're done, and you can put that part away and be like, hooray. So just because you see all kinds of marks or all kinds of, it's easy peasy to just make those little decisions and go. There's no heavy work to do.
Right.
So
Before now, when we would give you edits or we'd give you feedback, there was some heavy work to be done. There's not on this. This is so exciting. All right. Anything else, anyone?
Nope.
All right, Tina.
Come on out, Tina.
Oh, I think you were not muted, and you just muted yourself.
Sorry, I forgot. Story of my life. Talking while I'm muted. Thanks, guys, because I was so scared I had cut too much.
Mm.
And so to hear that that it's okay to cut a little, there's some things that I was like, and some of the things are things that you mentioned. So like I actually added the thing about the kids because I felt like I wasn't showing enough, that it was too telly to just have her thinking about her grandpa's scars without like showing something. So that actually helps me because I really didn't care for that myself. So I might get this mixed up. So Jennifer, you were right about the purpose of the chapter.
It's on the journey, and it's supposed to be kind of like
It's supposed to be him sending her on the journey.
okay.
And I actually have some stuff about her. The stuff that you were talking about, Jamie, about her internalizations of wishing she could go on an adventure in the chapters before and after this scene. So I think that'll satisfy you there. But then Jamie was right. What was it about? Oh, about the camp. So she was exiled from the actual village for a week because of the purification rite, and she had to stay outside the village for a week. But she found out her grandpa was sick, and so she broke that requirement and went to his house, even though she wasn't supposed to.
Okay, let me interrupt you right there so Jennifer can change the banner to Jamie was right. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Okay, so go ahead.
Jennifer was right before that. So,
yes.
It evens itself out. So when her grandpa was telling her get out of here, and I'll tweak the words a little bit, like go back to your camp. Maybe I'll have him say, because you're not supposed to be here.
Well, I would disagree. He's delirious and wants her to go on the journey. He's like, go to the. So what I would instead do, instead of changing what Grandpa says or whatever, is you have to clarify what Angelica is thinking. Well, crazy old man thinks I'm going to run to the south. I'm just going to retreat back to my little camp or something like that. And even if, because you see what I'm saying, he does not want her to just go back to her camp and get out of his house. He is telling her, right, go and find the other half of the Bible, right? So I don't think you want to ease up his fevered command for her to go. But and in fact, if we are already clear on what her camp is and what the purpose of it is, we may not need any explanation at all. It may just be that
right before there, before this starts, it's her getting the information that her grandpa is sick and making the decision in her mind that, to whatever with this regulation, I need to go to my grandpa.
But wouldn't she be concerned that her father, that the priests are going to come after her? Like, wouldn't she be so concerned that that's really the catalyst to get her to leave? I think that's why you wrote it that way, right? Was like, yeah, her grandpa's telling her to do this. Well, what's really going to make her leave? Well, the fact that she's going to be in big trouble if she gets caught now that she did this.
Well, actually, it's going to be because her grandpa, well, no, she thinks she's going to be okay just going back to her camp.
Okay. So Tina or Jamie was right about that. Okay.
Yeah. And then when Petra comes, she's going to realize she needs to get going.
Okay.
But where is it that Petra wants her to go? Oh, go hide in the forest until everything blows over. That's right. Okay.
Yeah. And so she's going to go north to the fish camp then. And she's going to, and the old lady is going to have dreams or whatever.
Yes, I remember that. So then that's when she goes to the fish camp and really struggles about whether or not she should go on the journey.
Yes. And then she's going to say, well, couldn't you give me a sign? And then she's going to get a sign. So that's, but when she gets back, her grandpa has been put into a cell and he's being accused of heresy. And so not only now is going on this journey important so that the Bible is reunited, but she needs it to prove that her grandpa was not committing heresy.
Good.
That's really good.
So that's going to be really what pushes her over that edge of not really wanting to go, is she has to do it to save her grandpa.
Those are raised stakes.
Mm-hmm. Very good. I feel like all this editing you've been doing, Tina, and the story structure changes are really improving the story. And
yeah, good job.
Yes.
Thanks.
So I agree with what Jamie says then. I think that you need to show us why or help us understand why she's going back to the camp, because I felt like everything was urgent up until then. And then she goes back and boils water. So you need to kind of make that a little bit more clear for us. Like, I guess maybe inside her head a little bit more so that to understand.
Right. Well, maybe instead of boiling water, I'll just have her like pacing around her camp in like a state of agitation.
Maybe, yeah, that would help make it feel like it.
And then Petra shows up and then she takes off.
Right. All right. Do you have any questions for us?
Rhonda, she was rubbing the stubble on her head. No.
Yeah, I realized that after I read down a little bit farther.
And if you were reading the book like all together, you would have known that because
probably.
There's only like half a scene in between her getting her head shaved and this scene. So
Okay. Something I did want to add to is I thought you did a good job with the Israelites leaving Egypt, the allegory section there, without even having to say that that's what they were doing. And another thing too is that I read more nonfiction than I do fiction, and I just love learning new things. And the things that you're writing in here, a lot of them, they make me stop and do a little bit of research. Like the tobacco. My ancestors were tobacco growers down in North Carolina. And so I never really thought that tobacco could be a northern thing. So I ended up researching for like half an hour about tobacco, Native American use of tobacco. And that will keep me reading your book just because you're adding these little tidbits in that
very authentic.
Make me research, which make me happy.
Yes.
Yes, very authentic.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Agree.
I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, you're not a poser. You know the Alaska way.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, is your back well fed?
A lot of YouTube videos on top of my. I mean, I know how to make a drum out of moose hide. I watched it on a YouTube video.
Well, you could teach Jen so that Will and Phoebe can do it in one of the episodes of the Will and Phoebe show.
Yeah, when they're done butchering a chicken.
And fly fishing.
Yeah, you'll have to tune into some old Postcast to understand why that's funny.
Okay, so is your back
well fed? Yes, it is.
Awesome. All right, so then moving on to Jen. What feedback are you looking for from us, Jen? And we can change the banner to your name. And this is from, what is the title of Sarah's story? I forget.
Sarah's story is, I think, I don't know yet, either Redeeming Sarah or, what was the other one? Something like that. I don't know for sure. It has Sarah in the title. That's all I know for positive for this book. The other three I know. So I had to pull it back open because I couldn't remember what I submitted. So I guess what I'm looking for is that this is earlier in the book. This is as she's arriving, actually. I guess I want to know if it has the emotional pull that I'm hoping. At this point, Sarah's not a very likable character. And if even knowing that she's not very likable, if there's any sort of sympathy for her at all, what do you think of the characters that I introduce? And yeah, I guess what you think.
All right, so into the isolation chamber. Anybody want to launch into some bread?
I do.
She beat me to it. Go ahead.
This is a hug, Jennifer, for you, and introducing the Mallories to us. I'm so happy for them. Okay. That's all I have to say for the moment. Otherwise, I'll go on. Anyway, I could just cry. I'm so happy.
I think Sarah is going to be my favorite.
I agree.
You say that she's not likable, but to me, like, she's so relatable. And I love that she's like.
Well, that's because you're not likable either, Tina. No, I'm just kidding.
Maybe that's it.
I'm totally kidding, Tina. I hope you know that.
I mean, when I was her age, I was not likable at all. So the fact that she's like put in this room and expected to stay there, and she's kind of bucking it, and it's kind of like it kind of has the best of both worlds, like Downton Abbey meets I don't know, like not one of those kind of Pride and Prejudice type books where the she's the maid and she's mistreated, and what is that called? Anyway, I'm excited to read this. I just love that whole storyline.
Yeah, I mean, good job making distasteful, nasty servants, that's for sure. I mean, I don't think they're anybody's favorites. and also good job of giving us the same amount of confusion that she must be dealing with. So wait a minute, are the servants here for me or aren't they here for me? And what am I, just this island all on my own? I'm not quite a worker, but I'm not quite a family member. So help me out here, throw me a bone. And like nobody will. And they're just irritated with her for not understanding it already. And it's interesting too, because people typically don't write this character. People typically write the fine lady who has all the servants, or they write about the servant. But you don't really hear very much. So when you read Pride and Prejudice, you don't hear what it's like to be like, they pretend that Jane and Elizabeth and them are middle class, but they're totally not. They have servants. So what was it like for people who didn't have servants, but who also weren't working immediately for the heads of the household? So it's really neat to get a different perspective of character in this story. So that's really refreshing to me.
Yep. To answer your request for the feedback, yes, of course, we know Sarah a little bit now as she's grown, and seeing her more in the beginning in a rough patch, I really enjoyed that because I know what she's going to turn into. And like Tina said, I can feel for her right now at this stage too. So, yes, you did bring emotion out of me into this.
And I love that she isn't just going to be mild-mannered person and stay in her room like she's supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that would so be me. I would be like seeing how I could sneak out, get around it, go to the kitchen, get me some spaghetti.
I would say that my meat is, if you want emotional connection. In fact, I flagged page. What is this page? I don't even know. Page 3, I guess. Page 3 of 4, the very first paragraph. It took Sarah less than an hour to unpack her things after Bentham had grumpily delivered them, and it became less time for her to become extremely claustrophobic of her tiny living arrangement. So I put a little note right there. Internal here would be nice. Why is she eager to run from the room? Is she running from some troublesome thoughts? Is she desiring to prevent troublesome thoughts from reoccurring? So find that she gets claustrophobic. I mean, if you just want to kind of have it in a general way that anyone would get in a tiny room, but if you're looking for us to emotionally connect with her, there would be a good spot to put something that would make us care and also wonder about. So it's a little bit of foreshadowing that we're going to get this news of what had happened to her.
I like that suggestion.
Yes. And so that's the only spot where I was like, I could really use some internal. The other notes that I have are just choices that you can make of how to turn a phrase or something that you could do or ignore, just how I normally give. But yeah, so other than that, I felt like it was a mission accomplished chapter. She's introduced to the house and we get this information about, I'm not a servant and I'm not a family member and blah, blah, blah. And so confusing. So mission accomplished as far as the facts, but I would make that one little tweak to help us to feel more like curious and connected to Sarah. So that's it for me. Overall, it's well done. So.
Mm-hmm.
Any other feedback?
Where is it? I'd like to know where this is on her editing. I mean, is this what she would put into the book right now?
Gotcha.
Do you think?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think so. I mean, I would think it's. I would think it's ready to go to an editor, just like what she did. She submitted it to us to.
Yeah, because I mean, there's really nothing in there that couldn't go into a completed book. I don't think.
Yeah, I didn't really, nothing. Now, I am not like a grammar punctuation person to where when I'm reading that I notice it unless it's glaring, and I didn't notice anything. Now, I would probably find it if I was specifically looking for it, but I didn't go back and do that. But yeah, I would totally keep reading this book if this was the beginning of a book. Especially, I just love that. I can't even say it enough. I love the storyline of her, having the overbearing house, whatever her title is, the lady in charge of the maids and how rude, mean she is to her. And she doesn't really fit anywhere. I just love that. I wouldn't even care if there was no romance. I just want
Well-
to know her story.
Yeah, and as we're talking, another thing that might be kind of fun is so she's introduced Sarah into this kind of bare bones room. We could maybe just something to play around with, maybe in a sprint, a little bit of like, well, what the heck? Here I am in a castle and all I get is this bare wall, blah, blah, blah. You know, like maybe a little bit of a bratty pout about that instead of just having us have to imagine that that's how she would feel. Would also help us connect to Sarah a little bit more. Like, well, here I pull up in the front and I'm looking at a castle and now I don't get to be in the castle. I have to go and be, you know what I mean? So that would just be another place where you might go to add some flavor to the character.
I like that.
Okay, is that it?
I guess I really didn't have any meat. I didn't really have any meat anyway, but if there was any meat, I have to say that I feel really sorry for the inside of Sarah's cheek because it really gets some abuse. And that is the extent of my needs.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so let's let her out. If everybody's in agreement, come on out, Jen.
Thank you guys so much. Wow, I was not expecting that positive of a response because to answer your question, Rhonda, this was a sprint that I went through and quickly polished up just to be able to submit it because I didn't have anything to submit. So I so appreciate the compliments because I wasn't expecting it. The inside of the cheek thing, before I forget, I try to give each of my characters some sort of quirk, something that like maybe like so like you know, like Warren, I don't know if you notice his eyebrows. He uses his eyebrows a lot. All my characters kind of do because I do. It was funny that you guys mentioned that, pointed that out to me a while back, but I had already done that with my characters. But that's her nervous tick, is that she does that, like with the inside of her cheek. And so it'll be showing up different times. But okay, so Downton Abbey, that is the same time period. So I love that, like, it felt like that to you. So that was awesome. And yeah, they are irritated by her because she doesn't know her place. And that's exactly what I was trying to write. So I'm so happy that came across that way. I watched a docudrama, if it can be called that. It was like kind of like a reality show from like 10, 15 years ago where people moved into one of these English manors, even though this is like in the United States. So I got a lot of information like by the narrator about the place of people. And when, Ron and I had already visited Meadowbrook Estate here in Michigan. We'd already done a tour. And then I watched that series and they had a governor, not a governess, it was a man, a tutor. And a lot of the struggle he had were some of the things that I've been putting into Sarah because the governess did not have like a regular position. She was kind of like in between, you know, she wasn't a servant, but she wasn't of the level of the family either. So often they like almost exclusively ate by themselves unless the family needed them for entertaining purposes at a meal, which you'll also see that happens to her too. So yeah, so I really appreciate it, the feedback. And as far as being able, like, would I send this right now? After what you guys said, I might send it to an editor right now. I didn't think it was ready, but I just really appreciate that. And I do love Sarah. And it's funny because this is the story I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew there was a third sister and I had no clue what I was doing with the third sister. So I love this story. I'm actually very happy.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't tell you right now who my favorite characters are, but I like this plot. Like I like that she gets into trouble. Like I like everything about this storyline. So I think this might be my favorite storyline of all of them.
But John doesn't show up in this one, I don't think. But just for you, Jamie, I might try. I might try just for you, Jamie.
Hooray!
Thank you, ladies.
You could maybe invent a John-esque character for me if you like. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So, too bad the butler is so mean and old. He could be broody and grumpy and redeemable. Anyway, okay. So is your back well fed?
Very well fed. Thank you, ladies.
All right. So I'm next, and I just want general feedback. This is Moxie and Frank meeting each other. So I would just like to know how it worked and what I should tweak. So silence for me.
Okay. I broke the rules, you guys. And I actually talked to Jamie about this last week because it was, I know. I'm so sorry. But anyway, I thought she did a fantastic job. I am so excited about this whole story because I know that she's going to be great at it. And all these little personality things that she wants us to add to our stories, she's adding to hers. And her characters are just alive to me. And in the last postcast, there was a section that was a little bit info dumpy, and she was kind of struggling with that. And so I told her I didn't see any of that. I didn't see any section where there's new information, but there's no dumps of it, you know?
Right.
And I think she's following all of the genre rules, and I love it. It's great. So that was my feedback to her.
I love this piece as well. I love these characters. I a couple things I underlined in her thoughts. Like the syrup flowing from the little jugs at the pancake pantry. Love that. I mean, you could say so many different ways, but the pancake pantry, I don't know what that is, but we all know what that is. You know what I mean? Like, I just love that. Yeah. The fact that he calls her doll and sweetheart, like this character is just the greatest. So I just think that's super awesome. And honestly, there's only a few things that like I just questioned, and that would just be like little minor editing things. Like I questioned the like Sudoku, like this. I can't remember when this is set. There's still payphones and like that. So I think that it's set in the 90s. Is that correct? Does anyone remember? We'll have to ask her. So then
did she specifically say?
She had said before when we talked, and I'm sure that if we were reading this from beginning to end, we'd be able to know that. And I can't remember. And because I don't play Sudoku, I'm not for 100% certain, but I don't know if Sudoku would have been something that would have been around then. I'm guessing that it would have been, but I just circled that just in case for her check on. And it says that, did you know that man squeezed himself through an old drive-through window? Again, we don't have the chapters before this. And when I was reading this, I thought that it was an office building that had burned or something, because they were talking about having clients come in and whatnot. So anyway, so I was just confused on that. But again, that's probably just because I haven't been able to read the rest of it. On the last page, she's in the hospital. So in my mind, I'm thinking about all of this. And Jamie mentions that it was all she could do not to throw her pitcher of ice water in his face. I've never gotten a pitcher they usually bring you like foam cups. That's kind of what the hospitals are famous for. And I think even back then they would have been. So for me, I would rather see a foam cup, because it just seems more realistic to me that there would be this little foam cup that she'd throw at him, full of ice water. But that's it. I mean, it's like, seriously, that's the only thing I can find wrong with this are these little itty bitty nitpicky things that are, it's so great. Oh, and then mother is capitalized and mom is capitalized when it's not actually directly talking to that person. Again, like nitpicky. Just this could go to publishing right now, and I'd be happy with it.
Okay, so I'm confused because you're talking about they wouldn't have had stuff back then, but I thought this was modern.
That's what we have to ask her. I'm pretty sure that it was set either in the early 2000s or the 90s. She had said that before, and in this piece she mentions payphones. So which made me think, okay, so I am right. It is set back in the past, but we won't know 100% for sure. Because remember way back when she was sharing this with us, she mentioned that it had to be set then because there were certain things.
Right, you're right. Okay.
Because there can't be like technology and stuff. Otherwise, some of the mystery would be gone.
Okay. I was thinking it was modern, but that he liked to like dress like a throwback. But
yes. He does like to do that. It's not the 40s for sure. So he is like out of his.
So that's what confused me.
Yeah.
Also, I have gotten pictures of water before when my boys were born, and they were born in the 90s.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
Michael was born in 91 and James was born in 93. And it was like a pink plastic thing. It was about this big and it would have water in it. And they would also give me a foam cup so I could keep refilling it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, when John just had a surgery, he had a pitcher, but the funny thing was he couldn't use it because he couldn't lift his shoulder. He could use his arm. So it was in there for him, though.
For him just to look at. That looks good. Poor guy.
I mean, it wasn't funny. It wasn't funny.
Oh, yeah.
He's listening right now.
He can't hear me laughing. It was hilarious.
Yeah.
So I agree with you guys about the characters, and I just have to say that her boss, Joy, like, I love her.
Mm-hmm.
She is so like irritatingly real. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
she's one of those people that just never lets you talk because she's just like, oh, and then how are you? And but she didn't let you answer. Like,
Yep.
I can just see her. I just see her with one of those cigarettes with the long thing on. It's like, you know what I'm talking about? Like, it's not in there, but that's what I pictured, like the long holder. But yeah, I really loved Joy, and I loved, and I'm just irritated with Moxie. Like, I wanted her to like engage with Frank, not kick him out. But I know it's coming. But I was just like,
does
what
she
are you
not
doing?
does she not understand how cool Frank is? We all get it. Frank's super cool.
I'm like, why are you picking him out, man? Just like, give him a break. But that's probably exactly what she wants me to feel. So I can't wait for the next part.
Yep.
I don't really have
one
any.
other thing. Okay. One other thing is something she does so well is takes the most basic mundane things that everybody knows what they are, like the pink puke catcher,
Yes.
and uses them in the best way they possibly can be used. And same thing with the pancake pantry and all that. I just love her descriptions. But I can't remember now that I thought for sure she was foreshadowing, and I was reading it. I was like, what's happening? What's happening? And I think she ended up not using that. What I thought was going to happen was that Mrs. Claus had poisoned her.
Me too.
And
Me too.
And I don't know that she didn't, because it's not quite over yet. But anyway,
there's something suspicious about Mrs. Claus, and there's something not right about the fact of how she enters the scene, and that like, how do you know this is for sure the nurse, since the other, how do we know that other nurse is off? I mean, there was, say, like, me too, I felt the same way. I'm like, I don't trust this lady.
Yes, exactly. So I'm glad you saw that too, because as a mystery reader, you don't trust anybody.
True.
Any new character that comes in, are they the one? And so anyway.
And for the record, that pink pukey thing is called an emesis basin.
Oh, thank you, Tina.
Oh, I will never remember that.
I'm going to make note of that. Just kidding. Tina's so much smarter. I love how Tina always points out how much smarter she is than me.
No, it's not that I'm smarter. It's that I had to order them when I worked at the doctor's office.
All
We would run out.
Anything else before we let her out?
Nope.
All right, Jamie, what do you got to say to us?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
So first, I really, really appreciate all of the feedback. Obviously, the compliments are terrific, but I also do appreciate the questions that are helping me, because I have a lot of decisions to make here, and sometimes just hearing what you guys say really helps to shove me in one direction or the other. So I super appreciate it. So the Pancake Pantry is actually a restaurant in Royal Oak.
Really?
And so it was kind of a little bit of an Easter egg for anybody who would actually know that restaurant was there. Sudoku, I have no idea. So the problem is, because I did an edit pass, I wrote this and it would be current when I wrote it. So early 2000s, right? But then I know I have done a pass at editing this since then. So maybe Sudoku came into fashion as I was I remember now. I was working at the Huddle House in Western Kentucky, and Sudoku had just been brought to my attention, and I had just started solving them in the newspaper. I worked the midnight shift, the graveyard shift. So I would show up at like 10 and go home at like 6 or whatever. And so I was doing this Sudoku, and I think that they were just starting to have a resurgence of like people paying attention to them. And so maybe that's why I chose Sudoku, although I really have no qualms with changing it to a jumble or any kind of a thing. So I will research to make sure that whatever timeline I end up for sure sticking this. So it's a very valid question, and it is on the table. The drive-through window. Okay, this is just not having the information. And part of it is because when I first wrote this, It was so different. First of all, it was Moxie and her friend joined together to start this ministry. And their idea was it's pay what you can and come in and we'll pray for you and counsel you. Okay. And then the part of the fun is that they opened it in an old Burger King restaurant. So it has glass all along the front and an old drive-through window. And they say, well, wouldn't it be fun if we prayed for people through the drive-through? And it was like this scandalous thing that hit the newspaper, and everybody was like, a drive-through prayer, just like the drive-through wedding would have been like a thing, right?
Right.
So the I have to somehow communicate this drive-through. So I have it still happening in an old Burger King restaurant, but I think I have eliminated all of that backstory and that people are getting prayed through the drive-through. Maybe it'll come back. I don't know. But he does jump out of the drive-through window. And because what happens is there's a standoff down the street at a restaurant down the street. And because the whole front of their building is glass, they're kind of like, well, what's with all the police and everything? And then they go to see if they can get a better view from back. But when they come back, the robbers or whoever had come into their building. And so now she's got to stand off with a gunman from a different location, right? And so he gets out through the drive-thru and goes and tells the police that bad stuff is happening down the road. So that's basically a plot point that you guys were all missing. Okay. So that's, and any of that is subject to change, and possibly that entire character will disappear. These are the kinds of decisions that I have to make. Okay. So the pitcher of ice water. Yes, I'm picturing exactly that pink plastic pitcher of ice water that has the crushed ice in it, and Moxie's all happy when she sees it because she's like, oh, I love crushed ice. So mom and mother, good. That aggravates me so much, by the way, that mom and mother are only capitalized when you are like addressing them, because I feel like I am dissing the person. When I write grandfather with a small g, I'm like, this is so wrong. But that is probably just a holdover from once upon a time when I didn't really recognize that rule. So good catch.
You know, but honestly, you're a self-published author. If you want to do that, you do it. But it's not traditionally the proper way of doing it. But hey, whatever.
I totally want to do it the right way. So I'm so super glad that you called me out on that, because it is something almost like my quotation mark usage that I've had to fix. So like I would do comma, quotation mark, new sentence, and it always has to be a period. And so I'm still forever catching, oh, I used a comma there. It should be period, new quotation mark. It's frustrating, but it's one of my foibles. Confused. Why did I write down the word confused? Oh, when Tina said she was confused, but then you guys all talked about it. It is quasi modern day, early 2000s, and Fargo is just cosplay before cosplay was cool. And then, okay, so Mrs. Claus is so hilarious. So the whole point of her being called Mrs. Claus and sort of everything is just more or less give you an insight to the way that Moxie's mind is kind of quirky or whatever. I won't talk any further about what role she plays or does not play in the rest of the story, except that to hear you guys talk sometimes gives me a headache about marketing, because I'm like, I really don't know how I'm going to market this, because I don't know that it's going to end up reading like a mystery enough that mystery people won't hate me and say, you call yourself a mystery writer. So I will be very anxious to get the whole thing together for you guys to read, and then maybe give me some help there to see. Because again, if you pick up a mystery and you're going to be suspicious of my new nurse, and meanwhile, she's just a nurse that looked like Santa Claus's wife, and that's all there really was to it. Like, are you going to want to run me up a flagpole? And then
I think that you need that kind of stuff because we're constantly looking. So you need to have lots of like rabbit trails that are like not the right one.
Okay,
you know?
Well, that's very helpful. And then the emesis basin. Okay, so she is introduced. The hospital scene is introduced a chapter before this, so she interacts with this emesis basin before. Will she know that word? I don't even know. Like, what do you guys think? Do you think it's fine for her to be like, she looked at the table, she saw the pitcher of ice water and this pink puke catcher thing, and that's how she kind of describes it as she's talking about, I'm in the hospital, oh, look, a puke catcher. Is that okay? Yes. Or do you think that I need to call it an emesis basin? Like, I really do not know which choice to make.
If you called it an emesis basin, nobody would know what you're talking about besides, maybe there'd be a few like medical professionals that would know. When you call it the pink puke basin, kidney-shaped pink puke basin, every single one of us, including the medical professionals, know exactly what you're talking about. And
that's what you would think. That
awesome. I really appreciate you guys. And so I'm glad that you enjoyed this, because I'll probably give you stuff that's harder next time. help me decide this or that or the other thing. So I super, super appreciate all your help and your encouragement. You're encouraging and liking this is really helping me to stay motivated to get through the editing and make these hard choices. So I really appreciate you guys.
Great.
Awesome. All right. So my back is feeling very well fed. Who did I say is next to Rooney?
Last one, Rhonda.
Rhonda. All right, Rhonda, what do you want? What do you want from me, Rhonda?
Okay, so I told you that my cousin and I are doing a program at our history museum in the end of August, and we are trying to get people to write out their oral histories. So we will take an oral history, but we want them to write little stories about them too. Maybe at their recorder shy or whatever. So anyway, this is something I pulled out of my past. I think I wrote this in 2001, 2002. And I really didn't change anything in it. And I'm wondering if this is creative nonfiction enough. Does creative nonfiction need to be full of tension? I'm just telling a story about what happened one day. So that is what I'd like to know from you.
All right.
All righty, into isolation with you. Okay, so I will admit first, right off the bat, I have zero ability to specifically speak to what is good or not good creative nonfiction. I completely admit I am ignorant about that. I can tell you that this is an engaging story. It's a relatable story. It's has a moral without being super duper preachy, and overall it is a good job. So that is a piece of bread. Anyone else have some opening remarks?
I'm with you. I would not be able to define or pick out like what is good or bad in creative nonfiction, but I know what's good or bad in writing, what I enjoy reading, and I really enjoyed reading this. Like, I really think that she did a really good job with this. What about you, Tina?
I agree. Like, I'm not familiar at all with, I've heard the term, and I've kind of always struggled with what does that even mean. So, but this was an interesting story. I liked it. I mean, we've all been there, right? Like, where our little one, we don't know where they are, and just that moment panic, you have to go find them. And so I enjoyed the story. It was well told. But as far as creative nonfiction, I'm clueless.
So come on out, Rhonda, because none of us can help you. No, I'm just kidding.
Just kidding.
But I do have, I just did the same that I always would do with this piece, and I had very little to say about it. I knew that she was asking, is there enough tension? I don't know how I have this message that she was looking to see, is there enough tension, maybe in Facebook Messenger? Oh, here is my piece, guys. I'm looking to see if I've had enough tension or whatever. And so,
Yeah, it's at the top of the page.
Oh, is it? Maybe I erased that. Okay,
Yeah.
so I highlighted the final sentence in her little opening before her segment thingy. And I think if you want more tension, there's the place to do it. What is the internal, instead of saying trying to avoid panic that I felt, describe panic, fast heartbeat, the room spinning or whatever. I put heart rate swirling thoughts, the headlines that you read earlier flashing through your mind, missing child, or, whatever. So I just thought she could sit a little bit there if she wanted to build more tension before jumping to the other part. And then at the very end, my only other piece of meat was she, at the very end, the paragraph before the last one, I will try, do as I do, and as I say. So my note is, so your character is going to what exactly? Always take a buddy outside, or at least inform others that she'll be going outside? Like, what specific action is she going to be taking that is going to change from here on out, right? And then she's like, and I will always make sure there's film, which I love, because then she can see the world from the child's point of view. I totally love that. But I just would like to know exactly what is she going to do that's different. But that is my only two pieces of meat from this little vignette thingy, and I really, really liked it. And I would be very happy to read this. I mean, I'm picturing myself, I'm sitting there waiting for my car to be worked on or at the dentist office or something. And I pick this up. This is a great, little story and totally relatable and tells me a message without preaching to me. So it's a win.
I really, really loved it as well. And I have very low meat. There are a few times that she slipped into the wrong tense or she was in past tense and then she moved in the present tense. Just a couple though, just a couple. And I'm sorry that I'm always the one that points it out. I feel really bad about that. But again, I don't know what creative nonfiction is, but when I read this, I loved it. And I was expecting there to be some sort of scriptural reference, like a Bible study, like a devotional, because it kind of read that way to me. Maybe that's what devotionals are. Maybe devotionals are creative nonfiction. But if she ever wanted to write devotionals, like a mom's devotion, something like that, I think that she would be awesome at it. Because if it's like this is so great. So the really good devotionals are the ones where people that they know the scripture and they're able to talk about the scripture, but more than that, they're able to make it personal and to show how God has been in their personal life with, how he's brought them through something or whatever. And she does a really good job with that here. And so,
agree. Totally agree.
So that would be my only piece of advice. Really, you don't need to do that, but if you wanted to, it'd be awesome. That's really the only thing I have to say.
I do also love that she busts herself about judging others. That's a really good lesson there because, that's very honest and transparent, And then, I want her to tell us more about what creative nonfiction is or isn't supposed to be. So when I read this piece, am I supposed to assume that Rhonda did have her child get out one time, but that names and places have been changed to protect the innocent, or exactly how much of this are we supposed to say truly happened to Rhonda as opposed to didn't? And so at what point is it fiction based on historical events as opposed to creative nonfiction? So I want an education, frankly, personally. So that's all that I really have to say. Tina?
I agree with most of what you guys said. And the only meat that I had was also in that last paragraph before the last line. That whole do as I do and say as I say thing was confusing to me. And I just wasn't sure what she was trying to say. But other than that, it was great. I didn't find anything glaring that stuck out at me, that stopped me. It was.
Yeah, it was really a pleasure to read.
Yeah.
All right. So what else? That's it?
I just realized I forgot to put her name up.
Oh, yeah, she's J.R. Nichols.
So sorry.
I'd also like to know what creative nonfiction is technically.
All right. So should we let her come out?
Yep.
Yes.
Come on out, John Rhonda.
Well, goodness gracious, you guys. That was such high praise. I appreciate it.
It's a wonderful piece.
Okay. So I can't believe I get to be the teacher. This is awesome. I'm writing this day down in my bujo. Okay. So, yes, this was an actual happening in my life. Yes, Nikki has a mind of her own, has never outgrown that. And she just used to always leave. I mean, she wouldn't walk down the road or anything, but she would just walk outside. And if I'm not paying attention, who knows? I didn't know my neighbors yet. I didn't know what could happen. So anyway, so creative nonfiction. Okay. So your grandma used to have to go pull her water out of the spring every morning. So instead of writing that sentence down, you would write, well, for the 429th day in a row, I'm walking out to my spring to pull water out so I can wash my face. So you add a little bit of spirit to it, a little bit of history to it. So instead of just the bare, dry facts, you add emotion to it. Really, that's where the creative part comes in. You've got to stick with the facts because it's nonfiction. You don't change name dates. I mean, you don't have to call anybody out, but so that's what that is. So instead of me sending you, Nikki walked out the back door and I didn't know where she was and I was in a panic. I told you everything that was going through my mind.
More narrative.
A little bit of history about why. Yes, the narrative. So to boil it down, that's what creative nonfiction is.
But what kind of license do you have to project thoughts, feelings, attitudes, perceptions? So you could say, for the 422nd day in a row, I'm going to pull water out of the spring. So what right do you have to say whether that is good news, whether she's able to count her blessings anyway? Like, can you venture even into saying how she feels about her situation?
Well, that's a great question, and I appreciate that. Okay, so this one that I submitted, that was my own story
Right.
that happened to me, so I could say whatever I wanted. Now, if my grandma, who told me the same story about every time she went to wash her face in the morning, well, at least I'm not going in the spring today, you know, in my past, if she had told me, well, day after day after day for 3 years until we finally got running water in the house, I could add up those days and I could say, well, it's been this many days. And if I know how she felt about it, you add that. Now, if I don't know the person whose story I'm telling, you can't take that sort of license. But since I did know how she felt about pulling water out of the spring, I could add that into it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would guess it'd probably be easiest to write it from first person perspective. Like if we're talking about your grandmother and the water in the spring, you could quote her saying, as she's you're watching her wash her face. Well, at least I don't have to go to the spring. And then you're inside your head saying, my whole life, my grandma has always retold me the story, and then you tell it that way. So that would still be creative, but okay.
Yep.
All right.
So how is this different than a biography?
It's really not different from a biography.
Well, some biographies are pretty dry and they're just, the facts and it's like textbook, where this would be a lot more icing on the cake, I guess, a lot more.
Yeah, like for instance, I don't know why Bob Woodward is coming to mind, but he wrote all those nonfiction stories about happenings in the White House. So he had to stick with the facts. But it reads like a novel.
It's kind of like when you're in a conversation with someone and I could say, I went to Egypt once and guy tried to buy me for 100 camels. Or I could tell you the story.
Right.
Exactly.
Like how we were going shopping and we were in the little shop and I was hot. The fan was blowing in there and it was dark and cool. And the guy kept giving her discounts. Like I could just tell that whole story.
I guess it's clear enough to me when you are writing your own personal experiences. And I suppose where it gets tricky for me is when you are, for example, plucking a person out of the past. So George Washington, right? So George Washington crossing the Delaware River. So is it okay to say, I'm cold because it's cold outside? Is it, you know what I mean? Is it okay? So then, like, do you know what I mean? So you could tell the story of crossing the Delaware River and make it entertaining and interesting for people. But at what point are you doing too much? Like, for example, what if it was unseasonably warm and you had no idea? Right? And you can't say George Washington felt this way or felt that way. You could say he walked over and lipped the flap of the tent and talked to Benedict Arnold and told him blah, blah, blah. Do you know what I mean?
That would be historical fiction because you're not, like, you don't know for sure. Right, Rhonda?
Right. So you could say, you could suppose that he was cold because there's icebergs in the river in the painting, but you couldn't say that, well, he hated the cold and he was shivering because he was proud about everything. You couldn't say that because you don't know. Maybe he loved the cold.
So you have to stay away from like motivations and emotions and, but you can say he did this and then he did that and then he did that.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, I appreciate that because, it's not for nothing that I'm asking. You've asked me for critique about this stuff. I've heard of other people throwing around creative nonfiction and I've seen calls for it. And it's like, well, I don't exactly know what that is. So I really appreciate the education.
Oh, you're welcome.
Did you have thoughts about the feedback we gave you on your piece?
I really appreciate it. I was not expecting you guys to like it as well, just right out of the box like that. I don't know what my problem is with tense. I looked for it. I Oh my word!
I don't know what my
I've got to
problem
figure
is
out
with
what to do.
quotes. I mean, we all have our thing that stumbles us. You know what I'm saying? And that's why
Yeah.
you have to like be transparent with the people who edit for you and say, please call me out on the tense thing so that I can fix it, right? Or the quote
Right.
thing, or the mother, mom, grandpa thing.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's why God brought us four together.
Yay!
Right.
You know, a few years ago, we didn't even know each other. But
Right.
we all have
Mhm.
different strengths and weaknesses. So,
Yeah. Yeah. But thank you very much. I appreciate it very much.
all right.
Okay, so I think that's it, right? Everybody had their little turn. And
Yep.
so I really appreciate you guys submitting again. It was really great to read what you submitted. And I hope that everybody watching also enjoyed reading the pieces. And a reminder that we are moving to Friday. So next week, don't come looking for the episode on Thursday. It'll be Friday. And we will sign off for now and talk to everybody a week and a day from now, right?
Right.
Yep.
So bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.